Right? So at a certain level, if you have this kind of CEO mentality, and I tell everyone I work with, don't wait for you have license to lead.
Dan Rubenstein, thank you for being on 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Of course, I have to say that I love the brightness of your space. It's always very important for me to also be in a bright space as I work, and it looks like you have a great setup. And I have to, before we dive into all the incredible stuff that you've done, whether it's running a company that had over 120 patents, or being an executive at various of the most well-known companies, you're a songwriter. Tell me about that.
Yes, it's something I fell into. Actually, when my son was 5 years old, he got interested in taking violin lessons. The reason he got interested in violin lessons is actually also a funny story. We took him to a symphony concert, and he saw that the violinist was the one that was setting the, tuning for the entire orchestra.
Right, the first
And so
violinist.
right, and so he said, "Oh, I want to study the violin." you
I
know,
love that. He wants to
and
lead.
so
Yeah.
so we signed him up for violin lessons, and normally it was during the workday, so my wife would take him in the afternoon. And one day she couldn't make it. She was also working at the time, and so I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to take him." And I went there with him, and I was so excited to do something like that with him. I came home. I told my wife, "I'm going to study violin together with him." She looks at me. She goes, "You're crazy. You play the guitar already. Why don't you do more with the guitar?" And so I ended up looking for how can I expand my horizons with guitar. I ended up studying jazz guitar, and then as I was learning all these chords and melodies, I started just setting poetry to the music. And over
Wow.
time, I just started writing more and more songs, and it's been fun. I'm about to publish an album in a few weeks. My first album. It's called Stolen Moments.
Stolen moments.
Uh,
I
yeah.
have to say, I'm surprised and I'm not surprised. It keeps amazing me how the busiest people that I get to interview are the ones that are doing the most amazing things, and they're ones that are following their passions, and I just love it. I have to say that I'm also drawing a very big parallel to my own father. He's a fantastic mathematician. He's also in the high tech industry for a long time, but he's a jazz musician, and he plays with his friends all the time. And you make time for your passions. I just love it. But Dan, Princeton, masters at Stanford, PhD in statistics at Stanford. You go on to be the president and the CEO of Reflectivity, right? It's sold to Texas Instruments with over 120 patents, and so your whole journey. Then moving on to Google and Facebook and Palantir. Talk to me a little bit about, did you plan ahead to do so many incredible things on your journey? Was there any strategy in planning this ahead?
Um, I'll tell you, it's a funny story because I don't think you can predict 10, 20, 30 years out. Everyone thinks they know what they're going to be doing, but it's very hard to know where the world is going to go. So when I was growing up, both my parents were engineers, and I got very interested in engineering. And at the end of high school, I started. We had an Apple II clone that my dad had built from a kit and soldered himself. And I started getting interested in programming it. And one of the first serious programs that I built was actually a program to conjugate Hebrew verbs.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a very nice program. I created shape tables for all the Hebrew alphabet, and the Hebrew grammar is very mathematical and orderly. So you can actually create a very clear algorithm for how to conjugate different words based on the letters in them. And when I was applying to universities, the guy who interviewed me for Princeton was actually an engineer and a linguist, and he got very interested in what I was doing. And he said, "Look, if you get into Princeton, send me a letter, and if you know how to code, I can hire you." He was
Wow.
working he was working at Bell Northern Research in Montreal, doing speech recognition. And so from there, I got very interested in This is automated speech recognition. Today, it's everyone takes it for granted that you can pick up your phone and talk to Siri, but back then, this was new, groundbreaking stuff. Uh, and I got very interested and very passionate on how do you train computers to recognize human speech, human handwriting, all these kinds of questions. And that's what led me to go to Stanford and get my PhD in that field.
Driven by curiosity. That's what I'm hearing here.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
And
I have to
and while,
before you continue, because it has to go side by side with this. This curiosity also leads you to then create a company that is steered by curiosity, right? You don't just stumble upon creating 120 patents selling to Texas Instruments.
so that's actually funny because when I was at Stanford, finishing my PhD in statistics, the thing that I thought I was going to do, and this is back in 1998, which is coincidentally the same time that Google was getting started. I thought I was going to go and start a data mining company. I was taking entrepreneurship classes at Stanford, learning, including at the business school, thinking about, okay, I want to start a company. I'm very interested about data. All these new, the internet was, I mean, the web, the websites were coming up on the internet. So this was all very new and very exciting. And so that's where I was headed. And then my roommate, my grad school roommate, came up with a way of making a micromirror display. So this is a tiny display on a chip. I actually have one here on my desk to share with you. I don't know if you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so that
Wow.
silver thing in the middle there is actually a 1024 by 768 high resolution display. So on this little chip, there's almost 1 million little mirrors that move. They're electrostatically actuated. Each pixel corresponds to one of these mirrors. You apply a voltage to an electrode under the mirror, and the mirror is electrostatically attracted and bends. And so you can control where light goes. You shine a bright light on it.
Right.
If the mirror is flat, the light bounces from that pixel and you don't see it. And if you apply voltage, the pixel bends and the light reaches the projector, and then you do see it. And then you get color by spinning red, green, blue light. Right. And so we started a company called Reflectivity to develop these micro displays for business projectors and large screen TVs.
The classic dorm story.
Yeah, if anyone knew what they were doing, they would never start this company because it was the most difficult, technically challenging thing. So the patents, it's not like we had 120 patents that we knew going into it that, oh, we're going to invent all these things.
You just needed so much new technology to make it work.
Yeah, we had 120 problems that resulted in 120 patents. So we had so many innovative things that we did there. We built our own etch system. We actually were talking to companies like Applied Materials to license our etch system. So building this chip required so much surrounding technology that it just, necessity is the mother of invention, right? You have a problem, you have to invent a solution. And that's where it came from.
I'm already upset that we only have 20 minutes for this interview, and that's why I have to move forward. Because you go from there, you sell to Texas Instruments, you become a product management director at Google, then Facebook, and then you find yourself as an entrepreneur in residence at Khosla Ventures, one of the most well-known venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, primarily focused on healthcare, right? I believe that's Khosla's, and he came to speak to one of my classes, and he was talking about the future of technology with healthcare, and it was mind blowing. What was that about? Why become an entrepreneur in residence after being an executive in three companies?
So what happened was while I was at Facebook, my dad started getting complaining of lower back pain, and we thought he had sciatica. He thought he had sciatica. And this went on for months. And it turned out he actually had stage 4 lung cancer that had metastasized to his bones. And it went, it didn't get diagnosed for a long time properly. And by the way, just as a PSA, if you have any relatives over 65 that don't have a reason for their lower back pain, they didn't have like chronic back pain for many years, or they didn't have an acute trigger, one of the things you should go look for is, could it be cancer? And anyways, he wasn't a smoker, so there was no indication, that he had, and he had no symptoms of lung cancer per se. And this kind of set me on a journey, like, why is it, this is 2012. Why are we in 2012 and something so basic doesn't get diagnosed in time? And just the idea that companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook, you go to Amazon, they know what you want to buy before you do, right? You go to Google, you type a few letters, and Google tells you the whole sentence of what you're searching for.
Why aren't they focusing on also
Yeah,
diagnosing cancer?
yeah. Or why doesn't healthcare better use technology and data
Right,
the way these
right,
companies have? And at least in the U.S., there's several reasons for this. I think the major one is that we have this uh, approach to data privacy that causes siloed data.
right,
You know, companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook, they aggregate the data across all users and build very sophisticated predictive models from that.
right.
Healthcare, for the most part, especially in the U.S., doesn't work that way. Right? Data is protected; it's siloed, and the efforts. I don't think there's enough being done to really leverage that data technology.
Right.
So I got interested in healthcare and trying and seeing if we can bring this approach, this philosophical approach, from the high tech world to the healthcare world. And I didn't know anything like other than being a patient from time to time. I didn't really know much about healthcare. So I thought I would spend a couple of years just trying to immerse myself, see what where I could learn, where I could help. And so the first opportunity actually was, I had known Vinod for many years because I actually, when we were fundraising for Reflectivity, we actually pitched him.
Really?
I think he was, I think he was still at Kleiner Perkins at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
Again, Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to just draw a parallel because when I ask you, we're in April of 2014, after you've had such a fantastic career already that the vast majority of people in high tech can only dream of, right? Selling your own company that is doing deep technology, then being a product management director of two of some of the most well sought out companies, and then you're saying that you wanted to spend a few years to immerse yourself in new technologies and feed that inner curiosity, and that's I think that's the most inspiration that I'm gaining from this whole journey. It's this driven by curiosity to the Stanford PhD, to solving a problem that turns into 120 problems, to then immersing yourself in healthcare because of a personal story. I'm sorry, I just had to put that in there. Please continue.
Yeah. So what I really liked about Vinod, he has a very strong vision and perspective around how healthcare should be done, and it aligned very much with the way I was thinking. How can we superpower clinicians and doctors using technology in new and innovative ways? And so I was lucky. He was very kind, and I was able to get a position as an entrepreneur in residence there. And it really allowed me to see new companies, help out, on due diligence. And I was planning to spend quite a while there. And while I was there, Palantir reached out and recruited me to come in for a senior product role at their company. And they had a healthcare practice as well, which was aligned with what I was interested in. So I thought, sure, let's go do this.
Wow.
And then ultimately, after about a year, I kind of decided that if I was going to do the kind of vision I had from my healthcare startup was not going to be easily done there. So I set out on my own and joined forces with my colleague Cameron Marlowe, who was the former head of data science at Facebook, and we started Physera together.
That's first of all, it's a fantastic colleague to bring on board. Physera, it's the company that you're currently running. Tell me a little bit about it, and what I particularly like to also hear from you is what is it like being a second time entrepreneur with your own company that you're founding. How is the process different from the get-go, not just in terms of the experience and the knowledge that you already have, but also in terms of the perception and getting people to buy into what you're doing, which is often one of the most difficult things for a first-time entrepreneur.
Yeah, look, I think obviously anytime you do something twice, you get better at it the second time. I think one of the mistakes a lot of entrepreneurs make, and I certainly made this myself the first time around, you waste a lot of time on things that don't actually matter, right? So, and what I'm going to say is going to sound obvious, but when you do a company, there's going to probably be one, two, or small number of things that you need to do exceptionally well, that are different, that are new, that no one else is doing, and that's where you should be. 95% of your time should be focused on that.
Right.
And then there's all these other things that you need to do, like the corporation, who gets what shares, hiring employees, the accounting, the lease, the real estate. And an entrepreneur, unfortunately, especially when you're starting out, you don't have money, so you can't hire all these people. So you end up doing a lot of that yourself. But the quicker you can get out of that
Right.
game, the faster. Now, the good news is, if I just look at the changes that happened in the world between when I started my first company in 1998 and the second company in 2015, right? It's not that much time, right? But the world has changed dramatically, and all the things, when now you have WeWork. You don't need to go and figure out a long-term office. You just go and get a desk at WeWork, and you can get started right away.
Right.
There's software to start up your own company. You don't need to
Sure.
hire an accountant. There's all these things that you
Right.
can do. So if anything, I think starting a company these days has become much, much easier, and you get the leverage from all these services and cloud computing that you didn't have before.
100%, 100%. So I have to ask, we just have a couple of minutes left. Dan, you do so many things. You had so many experiences. What was the most fun you've had? Like, what do you enjoy being the CEO? Do you enjoy being the PM, the entrepreneur in residence? Which part of the puzzle?
Look, I think every job I've had, I think there's been something amazing and fun on it, and in some ways they're very similar. In some ways they're different. So when I went from being a CEO of my own company to going to Google, one of the things I realized very quickly is actually at a certain level of abstraction, it's all the same, right? When you're a CEO of a company, you have employees, you have to convince your board, you have competitors. You go to a company like Google, the entities, they have different labels and different names, but it's actually the same kinds of things. Instead of having to convince investors, you have to convince management to fund a certain project. You want to get an engineer on your team, it's almost the same as recruiting an engineer to come join your company, right? So at a certain level, if you have this kind of CEO mentality, and I tell everyone I work with, don't wait for you have license to lead, right? Don't
License
wait.
to lead. I
Think of
like
it,
that.
whatever you do in your company, whether you're in marketing or sales, whatever function you have license to lead. Bring the CEO mindset to your work, right? So you're not just doing a narrow thing. Think about how it impacts the broader problem, and I think you get a lot of satisfaction when you feel like I have ownership of not just what I'm doing but everything. It just becomes very satisfying. So when you ask me what's been the most fun, it's all been fun because I bring the same mindset to everything I do.
I love it. I just love it. And before we end this, I have to thank you for being a source of inspiration for myself and many others within J Ventures, the early stage fund we're both involved with. Whether it's the screening meetings that I just love hearing both your input and everybody else's, but also in the monthly meetings. Uh, Tell me a little bit about your experience with J Ventures and investing in general, because you're wearing both hats, right? You're both a three hats: tech executive, entrepreneur, and investor. Is it just a big mishmash, or are you really differentiating into different buckets of your life?
Again, I think it's all aligned in the same pursuit, right? Of trying to, I mean, the concept of tikkun olam, which
Yeah,
to repair the world, to make the world better. So in my personal life, this is what I enjoy. This is how I want to spend my time, finding problems and improving things and making things better. Now, I can achieve that leverage through other people as well. Right? If I invest in someone and help them and mentor them, it's just a way of, in a sense, cloning myself. And I actually enjoy helping the next generation of entrepreneurs. It's something that's very meaningful for
I
me.
love it. I love it. So Dan, I already I'm warning you that in a few months when I go on my own path as an entrepreneur, I will reach out and seek for some advice and for your help, because I just can only imagine the amount of knowledge and experience you've accumulated. And I'm personally on a very similar journey. With already my friends that were thinking of starting some things together, we have one big rule, which is we want to make a really big positive impact, and we want to feel satisfied that we're doing something both with the deep technology, but at the same time really meaningful to a big market, such as healthcare and what you've done both at Physera and with Khosla Ventures. Before we leave, thank you again for being on the show. What are three words that you would use to describe yourself?
So I know you gave me a heads up. I didn't,
Not enough of a
I wrote
heads up,
down,
and I'm sorry for that.
no, no. So It's ironic, but I wrote this down at the beginning of the interview, so I'm not making this up.
Wonderful.
I'll show you. I'll show you the note. It's curiosity. You can't see it. Curious, helpful, and efficient.
Curious, helpful, efficient.
And efficient.
Dan, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much. And I'll see you at the next J Ventures meeting.
Looking forward to it.
Bye bye.